Okay, today we want to go ahead and talk about some basic items that we need to remember before we really start getting into a lot of algebra. And one of the things that we need to memorize are our properties. We use our properties to solve equations, we use our properties to solve expressions, and here's a list on the first page of the different properties that you're responsible for knowing. During your pre-assessment, you were able to identify most of the properties. If you had some difficulty, this is a pretty good list for you to start with. We're going to be going over a few more later on in this unit, but these are the basic ones that you need to be aware of. If you need to, go ahead and pause and look over these. Now, order of operations. The order of operations has 4 steps. There's only 4 steps to the order of operations. And those steps are, first, grouping symbols. You may have heard about parentheses. We want to call them grouping symbols because there's all different types of grouping symbols that we're responsible for clearing up when we're solving an expression using the order of operations. Second is exponents. And again, as I write this down, please write it down as well. The third step is multiplication or division, going left to right. As you read the sentence, as you see the multiplication or division, go ahead and solve it going left to right. And finally, add addition or subtraction. Again, going left to right. Now, what we want to go ahead and do is not only do these order of operations, but we also want to be able to identify any properties that we might be using when we're solving these expressions. So on the next page, you might have went ahead and solved these expressions. But what we want to look at, I might be doing it a little bit differently, because what we want to look at is not only solving the expression and solving it correctly, but what kind of properties are we using when we're solving it? So for number 1, again, we could go ahead and do the grouping symbol, solving the parentheses, but just for this, I'm going to go ahead and use the distributive property when I solve this expression. I can use the distributive property by multiplying 5 times the 3 and 5 times the 6. That's where I'm using the distributive property. And I end up with 15 plus 30 minus 4. Now, there really aren't any other properties involved here, just doing addition and subtraction going left to right. So I have 45 minus 4, which is 41. For number 3, I have this negative 20 in parentheses, and the only reason why it's in parentheses is to indicate that it's a negative value. There is nothing to this grouping symbol. So we're going to say negative 20 plus 3 times the quantity, 2 minus 8, all over the absolute value of negative 9. So again, I'm going to go ahead and distribute. And I want to list down the property that I'm using. So I rewrite my expression as negative 20 plus 6 minus 24 all over, and I'm going to go ahead and take care of that absolute value of 9 and put that over 9. Now 6 minus 24 is negative 18. So I'm going to rewrite it as negative 20 plus negative 18 over 9. Now I'm going to go ahead and do something a little bit different just so we can see how the property is being used when we solve this expression. I'm going to rewrite negative 18 as, I'm just going to take this right here and say negative 18 is the same as saying negative 2 times 9. And I'm going to put that all over 9. I haven't done anything. If you multiply negative 2 times 9, you'll go back and have that 18. I'm just going ahead for this sake, and I'm identifying another property that we actually use when we're solving this, because I want to do my division before I go back and add. So 9 divided by 9, we're actually using the inverse property of multiplication. The inverse property of multiplication, or the multiplicative inverse. And I end up just with the negative 2. Some of us go ahead and just do negative 18 divided by 9. We end up with negative 2, and we see it. But I want us to also see what property is being used in this as well. So I end up with negative 20 plus negative 2, and our answer is negative 22. For problem number 5, I have 3 squared minus 4 and 4 minus 3 squared. Now, when we're solving an expression using the order of operations, we have to take care of the order of operations within the grouping symbol as well. So I need to take care of these exponents, this 3 to the second power. So I end up with 9 minus 4 and 4 minus 9. Now we're going to talk about a really cool way to distribute these later on. But for this here, I'm going to just take care of one of the grouping symbols, 9 minus 4, and I'll have 5, and I have 4 minus 9. I can distribute the 5 to the 4 and the 5 to the 9. It's just a method of doing it. I'm not saying this is the best method. I just want us to be able to see how properties are used when we solve expressions, equations, so on and so forth. So I have 20 minus 45, and I end up with negative 25. Finally, on number 7. When I was solving this, I really couldn't see a whole lot of properties I was utilizing from the list that we have on the first page. If you see it, go ahead and write it down in the reflection section so you can share with the class. So I have the absolute value of 4 minus 7. 4 minus 7 is negative 3, so the absolute value of negative 3 is 3. That's our grouping symbol. Well, because there's a plus sign separating my grouping symbol and my exponent, if it's okay with you, I'm going to go ahead and do that 7 to the second power as well and make that 49 divided by 2. Now I have to take care of my division. So 3 plus 27, there's a plus sign, 27.5, and I end up, excuse me, I wrote the answer, plus 24.5, and I have 27.5. Okay, moving on. Here we have, the next thing that we're responsible for is translating from verbal to algebraic. So I have plus, minus, multiplication, and division symbol. And so one word that we can use for this addition symbol is plus. For this symbol, minus. For this symbol, multiply. and this symbol, divide. These are probably the most common words that we're familiar with. What I'd like you to do is take a second, pause the video, and write down any other words that you may be familiar with. We'll share this with the class. Now what we have are some verbal sentences that we need to translate into math or algebraic expressions. So before I do anything else, I want to highlight. The important thing on this is to highlight. So I'm reading my first problem. There are 1,024 bytes in a kilobyte. I need to know that. It says write an expression that describes the number of bytes in a computer chip with n kilobytes. Okay, so that's the important information I need in order to solve this expression. So what I would do is a kilobyte is 1,024 n kilobytes. There's 1,024 bytes in however many kilobytes. The second one gets a little interesting, and to be honest with you, I had to read it a couple times to just make sure that I was reading everything. Because for one thing, I'm not totally familiar with BMI, and for the next thing, there's a lot of terms in here that we need to be aware of. So it says if the body mass index, BMI, is 25 or higher, you're at risk of heart disease. That's a nice to know information. That's not a need to know information. 25 is not part of our expression. The BMI is the product, that's important, of 703 and the quotient of the weight in pounds and the square of the height in inches. And it says write an expression that describes how to calculate the BMI. So this is the important information. It looks like I'm just highlighting the whole thing, but these 4 lines are the most important part. And what I want to go ahead and do is I'm even going to go back and underline some key parts as well. Product, that means multiply, and quotient, that means divide. So that's important. So the product of 703, so 703 times the quotient of the weight in pounds. So quotient means divide. We need to know that. The weight in pounds and the square of the height in inches. And that would be our expression to figure out BMI. Thank you. Please write down any reflections you may have.